We're live right now.
Yeah. So I
Let's
wait for
go.
get some people tuned in over here. We're just sharing the links around. All right, all right. All right, man. Let me share this. Let me share this in the AJ link chat too. Retweet that shit, Josh.
Check your chat right now.
What happened to you, bro?
Like when I was on the plane, actually, coming back, I noticed Twitter wasn't working, or it stopped working, because like before we took off on Monday,
Uh-huh.
and I haven't like figured it out. Should probably do
All
that
right.
soon.
All good, man. We're gonna go ahead and get started here. We got a lot to talk about regarding the 49ers, a tough loss on Sunday to the Kansas City Chiefs. It's one that Aman and I were expecting, of something we talked about last week, but when you see it actually happen, it definitely hits a little bit harder. But today we got a special guest joining us, lead NFL reporter for the Score, a guy who has covered the NFL for a handful of years, covered the Packers, the Dolphins, the Eagles, now on a national beat for the first time. Josh Tolentino. Josh, thanks for joining the show, man.
Hey, Sandeep, appreciate the intro, man. Stoked to be here to chop it up about the 49ers, man. And first, I just got to thank you for that hospitality you showed me this past weekend. I was able to, spend some time with you and other friends before the game. But yeah, man, definitely a lot of takeaways from that game. Obviously, you guys being from the Bay, you know how much that matchup means to you and so many other fans. So for the 49ers to fall short again, it's just kind of like a repetition of what we've seen before.
Yeah, unfortunately, man, the Niners have definitely had their fair share of struggles against the Chiefs in the Kyle Shanahan era. I think now it's 6 straight losses to the Chiefs. And each time they happen, they pile on and it hurts more and more. But let's get into this, because you were covering the 49ers and Chiefs game on Sunday, so it brought you to the Bay Area, and the Niners lost this game 28-18. It's a game that they were in the beginning, but at some point the Chiefs just stepped or broke away like they always do against teams, and there's a reason why they're 6-0. There's a reason why they're the back-to-back champs, and the Niners unfortunately saw that come to fruition again. So, what were some of the things that stood out to you in this game? What kind of went wrong from the 49ers perspective?
Of course, man. I mean, before we dive into that, I think we got to precursor the entire conversation with the injuries. The injuries affected both teams for sure. Obviously, going into the matchup, in terms of Kansas City side, they're without their top 2 receivers, and Rashi Rice, Hollywood Brown, and then Juju Smith-Schuster. Only plays a couple snaps before he's out of the game.
Yeah.
On the Niners side, I mean, everyone knows that. Obviously Christian McCaffrey, the offensive player from the year, just such one of the most dynamic players in the NFL, has not been with the team all season. And then obviously the litany of injuries to their top playmakers. You see Brandon Ayuk go down. So
Debo barely played.
Yeah, Debo barely played. He's got the fluid, I believe, in his lungs, the illness, and hopefully he gets better soon. But just so many injuries, and as a fan, as someone who covers the league, and when you see these big matchups, especially a Super Bowl rematch, you want everyone at full health. And unfortunately, we just weren't afforded that opportunity, and more injuries came, to both teams. So get that out of the way at the beginning of the conversation. But focusing on the main question, what went wrong, just too many mistakes, man. Brock Purdy, one of the most consistent quarterbacks, again, depleted resources. He's got, all these new faces in the huddle. Still, he's got to find a way to score points. Crucial mistakes in the red zone. Defensively, they struggled to stop the run. Everyone remembers that Patrick Mahomes rush, how he tiptoed down the left sideline.
They should have popped him right there on the sideline.
Yeah, really kind of just to like put the nail in the coffin. And I covered the game from the press box, was also on the field, and you just heard a lot of sighs, during those moments. And I mentioned the Purdy's interception in the red zone. That was just such a that felt like, that was the spot. And I think even I were texting about like the Niners were getting some momentum here. Then that just
Mhm.
kind of spun them in the wrong direction and effectively
Do you feel like that
really.
was like the kind of defining moment of the game that changed everything?
Yeah, man, no, definitely. There were certainly a handful of them, but that was one where it felt like the 49ers, they were building some stride there, but um, yeah, just overall couldn't stop the run. Obviously, the injuries played a big role, and then just way too many mistakes. And then, the injury situation is very interesting because the San Francisco was not able to overcome it, but on Kansas City side, I mean, it's been a theme of the entire year that Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs have just not been up to par. He's playing the worst, ball of his career, but injuries affected the Chiefs secondary. They lose top two defensive backs, and Purdy threw three interceptions on Sunday, and two of them were from I believe rookies who up to that point they had only played 14 snaps all season. So for them to come in there and step up in big moments, and you could argue if Purdy gifted those, if the receiver was at fault, but for two guys who did not play basically at all season and to step up because of injuries, Kansas City just rose to the occasion, and you hope that if you're a fan of these two teams that they meet down the line again at better health.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you were okay. So you were in the locker room right after the game from the
Mhm.
Chiefs side. What was it like in there? The vibe from the team. Did you hear any sort of comments from anybody that maybe stood out about like, man, we own this team sort of thing, or like what was their reaction to the win?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and I hope like it's not a huge swear word, but as soon as I walk in there, you're hearing some of the younger players, like rookies, second year players,
You can say whatever you want on the show, but we're not on ESPN. It's all good.
yeah, yeah, and they're yelling out specifically "belt to ass." That's a common phrase now between with our generation, whether you're playing pickup basketball, whatever. But they're screaming "belt to ass," that we just whooped them, and uh,
Mhm.
like right next door, neighboring locker stalls, Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, who's still a young player, he had a sack of Purdy on Sunday. Justin Reed, their veteran safety, Bryant Cook, he even the player who got in a altercation with Trent Williams that ended with Trent getting ejected. Coincidentally, like the older players and Bryant Cook, they were the ones kind of taming the locker room. They were reminding younger guys kind of just to be level headed. That the main focus, and I heard this many times in the locker room, a phrase that was repeated, that they know that their main goal is to get to New Orleans, which is the host site of the Super Bowl later in February. So definitely a lot of excitement, more so like from, I guess, the inexperienced players, but the veterans were kind of like, giving them the little slap on the wrist of, we got the job done here. Let's move on to
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
next one. And even in conversations with some of those guys, I was talking to Jay Reed and Cook, that they know that injuries affected both sides, and, that they hope that they can, see the Niners at full strength on the line.
Yeah, you talk about full strength. I mean, obviously the Niners, they can't catch a break. Brandon Ayuk, he tears his ACL in this game. How big of a loss is this for the 49ers? And in your estimation and your experience, has any team ever had worse injury luck than the Niners have these past 5 years?
Man, to address that first part of the question, I mean, Brandon Ayuk, everyone knows like what happened this offseason and training camp with how he was trying to get his money for, unfortunately, for not only did he deserve to get paid with the performance that he put on, over the past couple of years, but when you're a player, especially in this sport, financial security as it pertains to how your career can be affected by injury, like that is on top of their mind. And
For sure.
you
Yeah.
you saw Jamar Chase from the Bengals not get a deal done, and he was able to secure a large insurance clause for this season in case of injury, in case of like what happened to Ayuk, because Ayuk did get paid and
Yep.
unfortunately now goes down. So
Yep.
all in all, to just really hit on Ayuk, such a key piece. You really can't overstate it. And you saw like obviously this season there was a lack of obvious chemistry. Even though he had those reps, he's played in big games for the 49ers. When you're not there in training camp, it affects the chemistry with him and Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan as a play caller. So slow start to the season, and I know 49ers fans can be frustrated about that, but still a very dynamic playmaker. And It felt like, obviously George Kittle deeply hurt and affected by that because, in post game I was by his locker too, and you could just tell from the vibe and the tone of his voice just how kind of demoralizing that type of injury is. But the 49ers have to find ways to push on, just like Kansas City, and hopefully Ayuk can have a full recovery. You look at the timeline. And also just the gruesome parts of the injuries, being an ACL and an MCL, but
Yeah.
you hope at some point next season that he's able to make a full recovery. But, that's why the Niners drafted, a wide receiver in, very early rounds with Sandeep's soon to be new favorite player, Ricky Purcell.
Ricky Pearsall, man. Yeah.
Yeah,
It
man.
was a big pickup for them for sure, but this Niners team, man, as Aman mentioned, has been devastated by injuries for the last handful of years. When you talk about Jimmy G, Trey Lance, Nick Bosa, ACL, this season or last season in the Super Bowl, obviously Dre Greenlaw, right? Just when you think the Niners are at full strength, they lose somebody in the biggest game of the season. And this year, obviously, we know Christian McCaffrey hasn't played. Hufanga back on the IR. Just missing guys left and right, man. And at some point you have to wonder, like, is this team are they cursed? Are they is there a way to overcome any of these injuries? Because it's been bad, really bad for them, but on the flip side of that, this team is still doing fairly well when you look at where they rank in the NFL. They're top 10 in total offense. They're top 10 in points. At some point though, are things going to let up because the schedule only gets harder from here?
Yeah, I think really to hit on your question about the injuries. I mean, every NFL team experiences injuries. We saw it in the matchup on Sunday, how it affected both teams. So, you really have to do some widespread research across NFL teams on, how many injuries exactly. And, obviously it feels like it's hurting this Niners franchise right now just because it's the key pieces.
Yeah.
So I think that's really kind of like just magnify the entire situation. But the Niners do some things to combat those things. Later in the season, Kyle Shanahan's known to change the weekly schedule around. Lighter practices on Wednesdays. We're already seeing that now. Actually, veteran days for guys like Trent Williams. To take a day off. So, and just speaking with guys around that team, guys who are very familiar with that front office and that coaching staff, there are efforts to help mitigate those injuries, but just unfortunately for the 49ers, again, key pieces is what really makes it a headline this year to all those star players.
Yeah, you mentioned Kyle Shanahan a couple of times now, so let's get into him. Question from one of our viewers, and it's a question we have too on our rundown today, but do you fire Kyle Shanahan if they miss the playoffs this year? This is something, Aman and I have talked about like a handful of times, and Shanahan is as good as a coach as he is. Obviously he has not been able to get over the hump yet. And, it seems like he's a great schemer, but like his play calling is often very suspect. And, this year their team is dealing with a lot of injuries. If they get healthy, bring these guys back and then fall short, there could be conversation. But if they just continue to sustain these injuries, maybe Kyle Shanahan gets one more year with a full strength team. But from your perspective, and I don't know if you hear any kind of chatter from around the league, what is like the league thoughts on Kyle Shanahan, and do you think his job could be in jeopardy sometime here, if not this season, maybe after next season?
Yeah, the NFL is such a week by week league, and totally understand where the root of the question is. But this 49ers franchise, based on, folks that I speak to out there, they are so high on Kyle Shanahan. And I mean, the facts are, they haven't been able to get over the hump in terms of winning it all and all these opportunities. But I mean, what other franchise in the NFL besides the Kansas City Chiefs, is making it to at least the NFC Championship game in each of the past 3 years? So I think that's a little bit of an overreaction right now. Hopefully that this team is able to get healthy later in the year. It's really hard to look past the adversity, especially given off.
Josh, we're not overreacting here, man. Let me tell you something. let me give you a stat. All right, Kyle Shanahan, when trailing by 8+ points in the fourth quarter, is 0-39. Not one win on that record. And then his record when he has a lead in the fourth quarter by 10+ points, he's blown a lot of those games too.
Yeah.
We know he's a really good coach. getting to the NFC Championship, getting to the Super Bowl, that's great. And then people might ask, if you fire him, who do you bring in next? But at some point, you need to get the job done. So I feel like
that's
his
what I
leash is
actually
getting
was.
shorter and shorter.
I was going to counter that with that. Do you have like an immediate answer in terms of
Bill
like,
Belichick?
If they were, all right, so I'm gonna counter with that. Bill Belichick, Hall of Fame career. Thanks to obviously his chemistry with Tom Brady. They won so many Super Bowls, so many playoff games up there in New England. But Bill Belichick, if that's your go-to answer, and I feel like that's a go-to answer for a lot of the fan base. You look at Niners Twitter, and people are pounding the table for Bill Belichick. 73 years old, coming off a record. I believe he was like 29-40 over his last 4 years. They didn't make the playoffs his last 3-4 seasons. So the grass isn't necessarily always greener on the other side, man. And I will say though, I feel like rather than firing Kyle Shanahan, a solution that has been kind of prompted, thrown on my radar in terms of like what a potential thing that could come is, switching up the offensive coordinator and, really designating those play calling duties. And from a team that I covered the past 3 years, Nick Sirianni, the first or his second year, when the Eagles topped the Niners in the NFC Championship, the Eagles went to the Super Bowl. I mean, they had one of the most explosive offenses in the league, and things go very, very sour. Last year, the Eagles finished 1-6, and basically the owner steps in and says, you have to hand over the play calling duties, and we're going to hire your coordinators, and you have to listen to us, or you're not going to be here. So I don't think the Niners will go to that drastic of an extent, but that's certainly a conversation that could be had. Kyle Shanahan, he's such a master of all these offenses. It gets copied all across the league, and maybe he fits better in a CEO role where he just oversees the entire thing.
It's kind of interesting that you bring that up, Josh, because me and Sandeep have talked about this before too. Is Kyle being the play caller and the coach at the same time kind of clouds his judgment sometimes in decision making, and we've seen it countless times in big games where he kind of
saw it on Sunday.
You saw it on Sunday. He overthinks. He overanalyzes everything. He's not as aggressive as he probably wants to be because the coaching side of him starts being conservative. The OC side wants to be aggressive, but the coaching side kind of like it's like a Jekyll and Hyde with him sometimes. Is that it's kind of like he has like two different personalities that he needs to balance, and it kind of confuses the entire team, including Brock Purdy, right? I mean, we finally have a guy that can actually make plays, but unfortunately, the rest of the team around him has been pretty shitty this year, which is really, really tough on a young quarterback. But talking about Brock Purdy, I mean, do you think that this was probably the worst game of the season, maybe of his career? I mean, is he overrated? Is he underrated? Like, where do you see him amongst like the echelon of quarterbacks? Is he elite? Is he mid? Is he at the bottom? Like, what do you think is your analysis right there?
Yeah, let's definitely set it straight. I don't think it's an over exaggeration or reach to call that the worst game of his career, if not definitely one of the worst games of his career. Also was one of Patrick Mahomes' worst games of his career, but by definition, worst passer rating that he's ever had. But
yeah,
I'm sure you guys know this stat, and you ask if I think he's underrated, overrated, and a project that I actually do with the Score are these quarterback tiers, and he's quickly risen to basically the top or second tier in my opinion. And the stat that I was meaning to point out was that earlier in the year he completed his 50th start, and guys, he's the franchise all-time leader in so many passing categories. And there have been some legends to strap it up, for that franchise and be under center. So for him to have this brilliant of a start, he hasn't even played 2 full years in the NFL, and to just imagine that he has 4 playoff victories, that's really, really hard to identify. And because he's on a rookie contract, they've been able to shell out money elsewhere and build the team around him. And, obviously the front office is going to have this conundrum of how to maneuver of giving him a big contract that he deserves. And, I'll say that straight up. And, coming from Philadelphia, a team that I covered the past 3 years, where you hear so much from the fans, from the media market. Obviously the Eagles beat the Niners in that NFC Championship game on how basically the script on Brock Purdy was that he loves dipping and dunking, throwing it to Christian McCaffrey in the flat, and giving it to Debo on a crosser and just letting them do the rest. Guys, if you look at the advanced analytics and the next gen stats on Purdy this year, like he is throwing the deep ball at like the highest rate of his career.
Yep.
He's
Mhm.
getting like the least amount of yak from his receivers. So
Yeah, and
uh,
that's something
And
that's
Mahomes,
really
Mahomes is getting the most.
there's no
yeah,
more yak bros. It's like, they're running routes and they're not getting open, and he's having to force these passes into like double and triple coverage sometimes. So
Or scrambling for his life.
he has been scrabbling for his life this year. He has been trying to make plays as much as possible, and I think because of that, when he tries to do a little too much, and he gets a little too aggressive, that's where the turnovers come. And we saw that on Sunday.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then again, bad game, worst game of his career. But when you look at when it matters most, I mentioned those 4 playoff victories for a very young, inexperienced quarterback. Guys, during those 4 playoff victories, or just the postseason in general, I'm pretty sure he has 6 touchdowns and only 1 interception. So
Yeah.
who knows what would have happened if he didn't get hurt in that Eagles game from 2 years ago. So I think that he's a rising stud, and he's definitely going to get paid here in the future when he is up for an extension.
Yeah, it's tough with Purdy because he has played well this year. The 2 games he didn't play well, he played really good defenses. First game was the Minnesota Vikings, who have been surprisingly really good on the defensive side of the ball this year. He had 2 picks in that game, and then this game, obviously 3 picks. One of them you can maybe say wasn't his fault when Ronnie Bell ran the wrong route or stopped short of it, but at the end of the day, went into the box score as an interception, right? So he's playing well against the teams that he should be playing well against, right? Like dominating a team like a Seattle or like Patriots. He played well against the Rams and the Cardinals, even they lost those games. But as much as I'm a big Brock Purdy guy, I do want to see him step up and rise to the occasion against these better defenses in the league, because we've seen him struggle against top 10 defenses over the last couple of years.
Yep.
Last year against the Ravens on Christmas Day, 4 interceptions. A couple of those balls were batted balls at the line of scrimmage, and that's an issue he's had a little bit this year too. Some of these throws that he can't get over the line of scrimmage for whatever reason. And it's not like Purdy's a short guy, right? He stands at about maybe 6'2", I think. So I think that's one area he's definitely got to clean up. But the schedule is going to get harder from here. They play the Cowboys this upcoming week, and then after their bye, they got Tampa Bay, Seattle. And then this stretch gets really tough. Green Bay, Buffalo, and Chicago finish up with the Rams, Dolphins, Lions, and Cardinals. So they got a tough remaining schedule. That's why it was very pivotal for them to try to rack up as many wins early on as they could. And it's why the losses to the Rams and the Cardinals hurt even more, because those are games that they had in the bag and lost very late. And so here they are at a point where they're 3-4. They're playing a Dallas team that they've, won 3 straight games against, but Dallas is very desperate for a win right now too, because they're struggling. So, Josh, with this remaining schedule, do you think the Niners still have a legitimate chance to make the playoffs? Obviously, they're going to get some guys back. Christian McCaffrey, Dre Greenlaw, Hufanga will come back. But still, tough schedule, like I said. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually spoke up to a source up in with the Seattle Seahawks, ahead of our conversation, just to get their perspective on the state of the division. And it's really wide open. You analyze all 4 teams in the division, the state of the Rams, they're banged up. You mentioned
Cooper Kupp coming back.
Yeah, Cooper Kupp coming back. I mean, but you see like, even he's on the trade block. Who knows the direction that they take over these next 2 weeks ahead of the trade deadline. Seattle, they've had some nice wins, but they've also had some bad losses, under their first year head coach and Mike McDonald. And, Geno Smith has been, I feel like overperforming, and more so like because he has a really bad offensive line, and, you really can't trust bad offensive line play later as the season progresses. So I have my doubts about that team. And, Kyler Murray definitely has flashes of his former self. And, there have been games where the Cardinals have turned in some really good defense under Jonathan Gannon, someone who I covered up in Philadelphia, but just not overall consistent. So a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of injuries across the division, and I'd still label it as wide open. And if I was a betting man, I'd still favor the Chiefs. I mean, I'm sorry, the Chiefs favor the 49ers.
That's not what we wanted to hear, man. That's not what we wanted to hear.
My bad. You know what I meant. Favor the 49ers, because at the end of the day, when we mentioned all those traits about Brock Purdy, his winning record, and when you have a coach who can get, to the final stage but can't cross that finish line just yet, I mean, that's a really good combination. And despite, all this new offensive personnel, losing key defensive pieces, Javon Hargrave out for the year. And I still think that they have enough brain trust in the building between the important people there, Kyle Shanahan, Brock Purdy, and that they'll be able to figure this thing out. And, they've still got a bunch of leadership too, defensively, so no shortage of star names there and veteran pieces that can steer this thing in the right direction. But they've got to start with back-to-back wins here against a hungry Dallas team. And again, a Tampa Bay team that's experiencing a lot of injuries. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, going to be out for the foreseeable future. So that could, change the direction of where those two teams are after the Niners bye.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see if they can get healthy, get right. This is a show about the 49ers, but I did want to still get your answer on this. Obviously, a big trade today in the NFL. Kansas City Chiefs acquiring veteran wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, the guy who was on the trade block. We assumed he was going to get moved because the Tennessee Titans are not a good team right now, not going to get any better. What was your reaction to that? Have you heard anything from around the league about, other teams maybe like that were interested in him? And how good does this make a 6-0 Chiefs team as they go on a quest for a three-peat now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing in terms of interest on D-Hop was the team's willingness, the potential team, this team being the Kansas City Chiefs, willingness on how much they were going to eat up the remainder of his salary. So they were willing to pay that. They threw in, a large amount there. And then so for them to be able to tackle a majority of his salary for the rest of the season was the most intriguing thing from Tennessee's perspective. But then you look at the body of work in his career, and he's still effective, definitely, when you turn on the tape over the past few seasons. But wide receivers, when they hit that age 30, and he's well into his 30s, that's when they tend to lose that explosiveness coming off their breaks and just their overall ability to win. But again, D-Hop, he's still proven an ability to win over the past couple of seasons, but it's really hard to gauge because he's been plagued by poor quarterback play. And our friend James Coe, our good guy James, he had a video out today that showed that Patrick Mahomes has the lowest amount of completions beyond 20 yards. So you hope that D-Hop can help him specifically in that category, and that Kansas City, as we all saw, a struggling offense this past Sunday, that they can unlock a new level of their offense. But overall, a positive move from a contender. I mean, when you're a contender, that's what these are the types of moves you want to see. Like, you want to see a Detroit or a Dallas, try to go after a team, especially when they know like they have a window. So definitely a position of need that the Chiefs were able to address here over the deadline. And we don't see a lot of moves, across approaching the deadline, but last year I think there were about a dozen. So maybe the first of many, over these next 2 weeks.
I mean, there's already been a few, right? We think about last week with Devontae Adams getting traded, and shortly after that, Amari Cooper, and now DeAndre Hopkins, so 3 straight receivers, and we all wonder, is a guy like Max Crosby going to be on the move? He's obviously like a hot topic of conversation right now. The NFL trade deadline, I think, is coming up on November 5th, so about 2 weeks away. It'll be interesting to see if any more teams looking to make a move, including the 49ers, who might be in the mix for a wide receiver. So it's something we'll keep an eye on. All right, Josh, I'm going to ask you one more question. We'll let you get out of here. This is just a question for you as a fan. How good are you feeling about your Chicago Bears right now? They're 5-2. You got your franchise quarterback, Caleb Williams, who's picking it up every single week. The Niners and Bears will play later this season too, but how good does it feel to finally have a quarterback you can feel confident about?
Yeah, you mentioned 5-2, and even their losses seemed like winnable games. To the Houston Texans and then Indianapolis Colts, both losses by 1 possession. But I feel like you mentioned the schedule part in San Francisco's end. The NFC North, I believe, through the first 6 games, it's the first time that all 4 of their teams have enjoyed like this much success. I forgot.
Man, that division is tough, man. It's really tough.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it again is the schedule. The Bears have not played a single division opponent, so when they do face the Packers and the Vikings and the Lions, which they do. So actually, here, let me tee it up for you. So over the next 2 weeks, they've got the Commanders this weekend, then they got the Cardinals, and then they get a dud with the Patriots, and then I believe from weeks 11 to 14 they get all
Division.
3 division opponents, and then they get the Niners. So,
Oh man,
talk to me.
tough schedule for them too.
Yeah, and then it repeats. So after the Niners, they get the Vikings, they get the Lions, and then they get the Packers. So,
Oh, backloaded
um,
schedule.
yeah, so we'll have another conversation later in the year, but at least they were able to stack the wins, and but I still think they're about a year or two away. They still need to definitely dedicate resources to that offensive line. You see the
100%.
defense is balling out for sure, but
Yep.
just because they get pieces, they obviously add Keenan Allen, but he missed some games due to injury, and Roma Dunze they drafted in the first round with Caleb. They're still developing their chemistry. Cole Kmet, their tight end, you feel like there's still chemistry there to be unlocked. So, but so far so good. But I'm very cautious about the schedule, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they don't make the playoffs despite this good start. But again, we'll see where the health is of everyone at the end of the season. But just really hard to trust bad offensive line play.
Yeah, it's been tough for sure, but at least they got a good start to their season. We'll see how they finish it out. Josh, man, thanks so much for coming on the show today. For those of you guys who don't know Josh, lead NFL reporter for The Score. Follow him on Twitter and Instagram at JCT Sports. He's a guy who's a very good writer, very tapped into the NFL league, rising in the NFL reporter ranks too. Josh, we can't thank you so much for coming on, man.
Hey, Sandeep, guys, I appreciate it. Have me on anytime. I'm headed down to Tampa this weekend, so I'll get a little scouting done before the Niners get them off the bye. But yeah, Tampa, Atlanta on deck this weekend. But looking forward to just seeing how the rest of the season unfolds, and always happy to chop it up with you guys.
All right, thanks, Josh. Take care.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
Peace.
That was Josh Tolentino of The Score, lead NFL reporter. Some great insight there from the 49ers-Chiefs game, and kind of just some murmurs from around the league. He had some really good stuff for us. And, we were talking about the Niners' upcoming schedule. Let's talk about this game now that they have on Sunday. 49ers, Cowboys, huge rivalry, obviously, for the 49ers. We know that these teams have history going back to the 80s, to the 90s, but even more recently, the Niners have 3 straight wins against the Cowboys, including one in the playoffs. But I don't know. I'm not convinced just the way this team is playing right now that this game is going to be a layup on Sunday. So what are your kind of early thoughts going into it?
Yeah, I mean, after Sunday's performance, it's really hard to be optimistic about this team anymore. And it kind of did feel like, Kansas City ended the Niners on Sunday, especially with that blow to Ayuk. It was really, really, really a tough pill to swallow for the entire team.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Kyle Shanahan talked about it after the game that, they were fearing that it was going to be an ACL, and that's what it indeed was. But, the injuries just keep piling up for this team. But looking at this game specifically, if there's a team that's just as injured as the Niners, it's probably the Cowboys. They're missing a lot of superstar players right now as well, both on the offensive side and the defense side of the ball. So I don't think we're going to have, Micah Parsons or DeMarcus Lawrence in this game for the Cowboys, which is huge because our offensive line actually gets a break from 2 of the more premier pass rushers in the league. Not to say that they've really affected us in the past anyways, because we've always schemed up so well, but given how many injuries that the Niners have right now on the offensive side of the ball, a lot of the game breakers that we've had in the past, both on offense and defense, are not there anymore for the foreseeable future. So it's definitely going to be a tough game. I expect it to be a close game throughout. I don't expect it to be a high-scoring game. Even though the Niners move the ball, they can't score for some reason this season. The red zone struggles. They reared their ugly head again on Sunday against the Chiefs when they had so many opportunities to take advantage of that game after forcing 3 turnovers themselves. They turn over the ball 3 times as well, and 3 really, really bad turnovers, 2 of them being in the red zone. So I'm just looking to see if the 49ers can put a complete game together, right? All 4 quarters, all 3 phases, which they haven't been able to do at all this season. Even in their wins, they haven't been able to do that. So it's going to be interesting to see if the team can just squeak in with a 4-4 record at the bye. If they go to 3-5, I told you on Friday, if they go to 3-5, they're not making the playoffs this year. You can write them off. You can do whatever you want. They are not going to make a second half run this year. The injuries are going to be a major, major factor for this team moving forward. If we can get Christian McCaffrey back, Hufanga, Dre Greenlaw in the second half of the season, relatively healthy and able to make a contribution quick, they'll make the playoffs. But it's imperative that they're at 500 and not below going into the bye week.
Yeah, the last thing you want as the 49ers is going into the bye week on a 2-game losing streak. And the Cowboys might be banged up just as much as the 49ers. And that's why it's pretty fair game, right, on this one on Sunday. You mentioned Micah Parsons is out, DeMarcus Lawrence is out. They still don't have Deron Bland, who's been out for the whole season with a foot injury. And there's a big reason. These are big reasons why the Cowboys are struggling on defense right now. They're 24th in total defense, allowing nearly 366 yards a game. They're 27th against the run. I think that's going to be bodes well for a really big Jordan Mason and maybe Isaac Guerrero game too.
Oh yeah,
This is a game where I'm sure Kyle Shanahan is going to really, really try to push for that 30 rushes mark that he likes to get to. You'll see Jordan Mason probably get 20 to 25 of those carries, and then Isaac Guerrero will probably get his handful of carries too. But you have to think that the game plan is going to be to just run the ball down Dallas's throat as much as they can. They're decent against the pass. They give up 213 yards a game, but yeah, terrible against the run. And they also give up 28 points a game right now, which is 31st in the NFL.
they've been terrible. They've been terrible.
One thing I really like about, I guess, Niner fans as a whole is, even though we lose these games, one thing we never do, I feel like, really, is make excuses, for injuries. Like, yes, we know we're a very banged up team right now, but even last week against the Chiefs, despite all the injuries that the Niners have, we still felt like that's a game that we were right there. And, we're not looking at him at like, oh, if we had CMC or if we had this person, we would have won. Because, I look at it as like, hey, if Purdy doesn't throw those interceptions, and maybe if the Niners are like a little bit more prepared, that's a game they could have won. So I feel like we don't really use the injuries as an excuse for why we lose a game, which is a good thing. But like you mentioned, this is a game that they have to come out and get, because it only gets harder from here. And you go into the bye week 4-4, it's going to be really tough on the flip side of that, because a lot of these teams are really, really coming for it, like Green Bay, like Chicago, like Buffalo, not to mention Miami, who's getting Tua back soon, and then Detroit, who's definitely going to be looking for some revenge after last year's NFC title game. So this is going to be a really, really good game for the 49ers. That's on Sunday Night Football. What's your here? We got a question here from Indo. Do you start selling veterans if they lose to Dallas this week? It's an interesting question. We've seen Deebo Samuel's name thrown out in some trade rumors here and there.
It's not happening now.
By the way, Deebo was at practice today. He didn't participate, but he's out of the hospital, getting over his pneumonia. And Kyle Shanahan said there is a chance that he's going to play on Sunday. So I think he'll be out there, especially because it's a late game on Sunday. He should be good to go. I don't see the Niners selling anybody, even though they're in a position where, yes, they are struggling. Let's say they lose this game and they're 3-5 then. They're probably looking at it as like, hey, we're getting healthy after the break. We're going to get Christian McCaffrey back at some point. We're going to get Dre Greenlaw back. We're going to get Hufanga back. We're going to get these guys, and it'll open things up for us. And if anything, maybe they're going to look to add guys. Kyle Shanahan said that, this team is always looking at ways to improve, and we know they've made moves before the deadline the last few years acquiring guys. So maybe they go after a receiver. Maybe they look to get some more depth at the D-line position.
Yep.
Who knows? So I wouldn't expect them to sell guys, but maybe they're going to be buyers, right?
Yeah, for sure. Two names that keep coming up this past week are DJ Jones and Deontay Johnson. DJ Jones, obviously, he has a history with the 49ers. He was a really, really good D tackle for us for 3 years. Deontay Johnson, really good possession receiver. Don't know if he might be the answer for what we're looking for in terms of a receiver on the outside. Yeah, he's got a lot of speed. He's a possession receiver, but I feel like if you're going to go out after a receiver, you need someone that can get, good yards after the catch, someone that can, catch the deep ball and catch it up in the end zone. I'm looking at someone like Courtland Sutton that could possibly be a good fit for the 49ers, a guy that has speed and he can catch touchdowns in the red zone, which is something that we've really, really struggled with this season with the receivers. I think most of the touchdowns that we've had in the red zone have gone to tight ends, if I'm not mistaken, or to running back. So it's going to be interesting to see, if they are indeed buyers, which I do expect them to be, especially if they win this game. They have 2 weeks to prep for their next matchup and 2 weeks to basically make any changes that they need to make. The bye week can't come any faster for this team right now. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what what their answer is, moving forward.
Yeah, Zendo mentioned Christian Kirk, another guy to keep an eye on too. Really good slot receiver, veteran guy who I think has maybe a year left on his contract after this season. So maybe he's definitely well within reach. Question here from Logan: how do you feel about the season if there's a loss to Dallas? It's definitely not going to be looking good. As we were just saying, they're going to fall to 3-5 if they were to lose that game. I wouldn't say the season's over because, again, they are still going to get healthy after the break. But it's just going to continue to make things harder, right? Because you fall to 3-5, and I mentioned, the tough schedule that's ahead for the 49ers. A lot of division games still left against Seattle, Arizona, and the Rams. And then we also face the Bills, Bears, Dolphins, Lions, Bucks. So it doesn't get any easier. The front half of the schedule was supposed to be the easier part of it, and the Niners have struggled with that. So I won't say the season's going to be over if they lose this game on Sunday, but I think their chances of making the playoffs and winning the division gets harder and harder, especially when you look at Seattle that's, hanging in there right there at 4-3, coming off a good win. When Josh was on, he mentioned how good the NFC North is this year. I wouldn't be surprised if all four of those teams can, or there's only 2 wild card spots, right? So you're going to see a couple of three wild card spots. Maybe all 4 teams from the NFC North get in this year. Who knows? Yeah. Depending on how the Bears can fare with the back half of their schedule. But the Lions are going to get in. The Packers look like they're going to get in, and the Vikings look like they're going to get in, right? Yep. So if the Niners don't end up winning this division, it could be hard for them to make the playoffs. So they really have to get those games. Comment here from Gary. We fire Kyle. Half of the league is lining up to hire him. So whoever you get after him better be making a NFC Championship game, Super Bowl every year, like Shanahan did. That's a very good point. Kyle Shanahan, if he were to hit the market, is a guy who will be off the market within moments. Whether it's as a head coach or as an offensive coordinator somewhere else, he will get picked up. So I think, I think we were talking about this. He probably has one more season after this upcoming season, right? Because this year, even though he's had his struggles, we can't fully blame him at the same time because the team has been banged up really badly. And that's something that's out of his control. Purdy throwing 3 interceptions is something that's out of his control, right? So you can't blame him for things like that. So it'll be interesting to see. I just want to see the Niners come out with some energy, come out with some heart on Sunday. The NFL and sports in general, you got to shake off your last loss. It's all about the next game, right? So They can't be feeling bad about the Chiefs game. It's a game that they got outplayed. At least it's a game that they didn't have the lead in and gave up the lead this time, right? The Chiefs were in control of that game for the most part the whole time. So I guess that's the one positive we can take away. The Niners will be fine, but let's hope they can come out on Sunday and get this win against the Cowboys.
Yeah, for sure. As much as hard as it was on Sunday after that loss and how demoralizing it was and how it felt like, it could be like the end, it's still a pretty long season at the end of the day. And, Gary, to Gary's point, you can't find a better offensive schemer than Kyle Shanahan. It's very rare. The only other guy I would probably think is Andy Reid, who obviously has Kyle Shanahan's number, but it's for different reasons, not because of offense, because of defense. So that's more Spagnuolo, and that's more on defensive coordinators that haven't been able to scheme against Kyle Shanahan over the past couple of years. So I think, notoriously this franchise under Kyle Shanahan has always been a second half team. And that's kind of like what I'm still banking on. I feel like every other year we go through this situation with the 49ers where we're like, man, they fucking suck. Like, why are they 3-5 right now? And they reel off like 5 or 6 straight wins. I think the year that Purdy started, they were 3-4 also to start the season. And they reeled off, I think, 9 straight to end the season. So, there's definitely a lot of potential for the Niners if they can get healthy. And that's a big if right now. But it starts this Sunday with, obviously beating the Cowboys, a team who I feel like is not going to be making the playoffs this year the way that they've been playing. They have no run game whatsoever, right? And their defense is really suspect as well. They haven't won a home game since the end of last season, which is pretty insane. So it's going to be interesting to see like what kind of fight that the team comes out with on Sunday. I do expect all the guys that didn't practice today to actually play on Sunday, maybe except for Jake Moody. But outside of that, I think everyone else knows how big this game is. Everyone knows that, they have a week off after this. So that kind of gives you a little bit of more a little bit more of aggressive approach going into this week with any kind of like nagging injuries you might have. And who knows, man? I mean, we've seen this team make super deep runs in the past. We've seen this team upset teams in the playoffs when they weren't supposed to upset anybody in the playoffs. So, and I still do feel like we have the most talented roster in the NFC, no matter what anybody says. Outside of maybe Detroit, we probably have the most offensively gifted players in the league at this very moment. So, in the NFC, so it's going to be a challenge for sure. It's going to be a lot on Brock's shoulders for the rest of the season because there's a lot of unknowns with his receivers and obviously with Christian McCaffrey. And the only thing that we can do right now is just hope that this team can figure it out. They've done it in the past, and hopefully that spark is still there for them to do it at least one more time this season.
Yeah, you make a good point. The Niners have definitely been a second half team. A lot of these past few seasons where they've started maybe 3-4, 3-5, and rattled off win streaks right afterwards. So there's a very good chance that could still happen. And even if the Niners don't make a move for a wide receiver, I think they'll be okay. You still have Deebo Samuel. You have Juwan Jennings. Ricky Pearsall is someone who's going to continue to get more and more reps, more and more snaps. Last week against the Chiefs, I think on his 37 snaps, he had the most routes ran. So they're going to definitely start to feed him the ball much more. So if we stick with our guys, get Cowing more involved in the deep game, we saw him catch a big pass last week. I think they'll be okay. To Harpreet's point here, I did say last week, if the Niners lost to the Chiefs, the season was going to be over. But you know what? That loss wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, because it's not like even though the Niners, mistakes were self-inflicted with the turnovers and whatnot, giving up, the big play to Mahomes on the sideline. Obviously, it was a game in which they simply got outplayed. And we talked about like the team that takes care of the ball was going to be the difference. And Mahomes had 2 interceptions, but Purdy had 3. And the Chiefs were able to capitalize on it. And so it didn't feel like it was as demoralizing as a loss as I thought it was going to be. It's a loss nonetheless to a team that they definitely wanted to beat. But, if they win this game again on Sunday, 4-4, you're going into the bye. It's another week for your guys to get healthy before you play against the also depleted Bucs team, right? So it's another chance they can get right this Sunday to come out the bye week and get back over the 500 mark. So,
and real quick on that, I still want to talk a little bit about the Chiefs. Obviously, like I just can't get them out of my mind after like so many demoralizing losses.
They're living rent free.
We talked about it on Friday when we met up. Did a little bit of a preview for obviously for this show, but it kind of felt like the Niners were not confident going into this game whatsoever. All the players, the coaching staff, it just felt like they were still shook. They just can't shake that Super Bowl loss that they got.
Yeah, Shanahan using the phrase PTSD just tells you all you need to know.
Exactly. And when they asked Deebo and Kittle, like how do you guys feel about it? They're like, well, we never beat them, right? So it'd be nice to get a win. When you kind of exude that kind of like confidence or lack of, I should say, it's really, really hard to beat a team that kind of has your number, right? So obviously we still have a chance to meet them again down the road, but we got a long, long path to get there. So
yeah, that's a really, really long road for sure. So one game at a time for the 49ers. Let's come out on Sunday. Let's beat these Cowgirls, a team that we've owned, like I said, over the last few years, 3-0. Last year, they beat them 42-10. That was a game in which Purdy had 4 pass touchdowns.
Yep. Let's
hope he can come out, replicate that. Again, expect the Niners to have a big running game, big Jordan Mason day. Let's get Ricky Pearsall more involved in the offense. Deebo, I'm sure, will be out there. This is a get-right game for the 49ers, so let's go into Dallas and smack those Cowgirls' cheeks, all right? Let's get this game on Sunday night, guys. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. We'll be back next week to recap, hopefully, a win against the Dallas Cowboys in Week 8. For myself, Sandeep, this is Aman. This is The Deep Dive, and we'll catch you guys next week.
See you guys. Thank you.